Okay, hey guys, I am here with just this sort of video on a bit of a guide to the various army men poses that I own, and I'm sure plenty of other people have. I'm just going to talk about them, really just my opinion on how each pose is, all the set and the molds and the makers and all that, and get some of the names down to a few of them just as a useful sort of reference for you guys. Okay, so I think we'll start off with one of the main army men poses slash manufacturers that we all know, which is the Timmy Mold. Now, these Timmy molds are based off the sort of Vietnam era US soldiers, and they are quite a nice set of soldiers, which is probably why they're so popular and well known. At the moment, Timmy is probably the king of the army men manufacturers, with their consistently good soldiers that they are producing that are easy to get and readily available. The poses themselves are very nice. The detail is crisp, but it's also quite simple, so it's what an army man should be. The plastic they're made of it's firm, but it's also a bit soft and squishy, so you can bend it a bit, which is good for like when a kid's playing with them and stuff like that. It makes them nice and durable. The pose selection is quite nice. It's a bit odd in some places, which is what makes them quite unique. So we always have the this guy here with the bayonet over his head, which has always been an interesting pose. That, you know, it's not one that you would use a lot. Kind of same goes to this guy. He's kind of just standing around. It's like an awkward sort of pose. Originally the mold had a grenade in his hand. He was going to be throwing a grenade, but the mold broke, so they had to re-sculpt it into an open hand, which is why he's like that nowadays. So he's an odd pose, but he's still quite useful. You got your captain, you've got a bazooka man, which is kneeling down. You've got this light machine gun here, which is an excellent pose. Quite a lot of people's favorites, I believe. It's very nice looking, very useful. So you got your heavy weapon and you got your machine gun weapon. You've also got a mortar, which is absolutely fantastic. You've got some light artillery for those who can't actually get proper cannons. You have a flamethrower who's advancing. He makes a good advancing pose, as well as you know, just a sort of flamethrower. Then you got two prone poses. One of them is shooting his rifle and the other one is crawling, which is very useful. We have our radio man and our captain. One pose that I think is sort of missing from the selection that would make it great would be someone standing up and firing their rifle. The kneeling down guy is quite tall, so you can still get away with it and it's quite nice. But what really kind of sets the whole lot back is probably that lack of standing and firing. Of course, you can't talk about the Bmc Soldiers without talking about their various clones that they have produced over the years. Some by the Chinese manufacturers. Very, very, very common. These made up the bulk of my armies back when I was a child, back when you know, Toy Story and Toy Story 2 were out and about, and you know, the army men were made very popular, especially the Timmy pose by this. So these recasts of the Timmy poses were all over the joint. Big huge bags, sort of different colours. Some of them are re-sculpted, like these ones have smoother helmets than the you know, the Vietnam ones with their cloth covers or the rounded minesweep end, compared to the other ones that have a sort of triangle square shape. The clones from the Chinese companies have the detail is still, it's very smoothed out. The mold has obviously been used a lot, and it's not as high quality, so they are lacking in that department, but they still are quite nice figures. They got a lot of fond memories attached to them. It's just they aren't the best, but they're still pretty great in my eyes. You've also got some other higher quality plastic sort of recasts and whatnot. And there's also another interesting element, which I call the Bizarro Timmy poses. These were made by True Heroes at the moment. I don't know if True Heroes always manufactured them, but at the moment that's who does these poses. Now I call them the Bizarro Timmy poses, is because a lot of them are the complete opposite of the Timmy poses that they're replicating. So you got the usual, you got the Minesweep, the guy here, which they put a grenade in his hand, which is always great. If we can get that in focus. Yeah, it doesn't want to. So they resculpted the grenade back in his hand. You've got the mortar person, you've got the Minesweep, you've got the machine gun, except he doesn't have a stand. So it's a bit more useful for putting behind barricades and stuff like that. You've also got your bayonet guy, and you have the shooting officer, where I put him somewhere. Yeah, here he is. They've redone the officer to be a bit more active in his pistol. He's holding it outwards. Bit of a more awkward pose, but it's not too bad. But what they've done, which is interesting, is that they have the kneeling guy is no longer kneeling. He's standing and firing his rifle, advancing. The flamethrower guy is kneeling, and the bazooka guy is now standing as well. So this actually makes it quite a good set. It's like a companion, like a really great companion to the Timmee poses, because they pretty much fill in the gaps of what this one is sort of lacking. So these two together are absolutely fantastic, and I'm kind of glad they did that. Moving on from Timmee, but keeping up with the sort of recast soldiers, we have the Bmc Soldiers here. They're all modelled after US World War II infantry, and these guys have quite a lot of detail on them. They're quite well sculpted, and they have a lot of poses that comes with them. Some of these poses they're interesting, alright? I mean, you got this guy here who's an officer with his pistol, and he's like waving about his hand. He's advancing, he's like calling upon his troops, and you also have another officer who's firing his pistol. You have the usual standing and firing guy, but there's no kneeling guy, which is interesting. You got a guy advancing with his bayonet, which is very nice indeed. Dude throwing a grenade. This guy who's waving his rifle around, and this dude who's got his submachine gun who's firing it very awkwardly from his chest. And a prone sniper dude whose rifle appears to be sticking his rifle butt right up into his neck. So that's interesting. But they're quite nice poses. The plastics the same as the ones that they make for Timmee, so they're nice durable soldiers, and they stand quite well without their stands. The poses are fine. They're not like, none of them are really standout. They can all be used on their own without having to get other army men to fill in roles or anything like that, like kneeling or anything like that. But the main problem I think of these guys is that they're quite tall. And this problem mainly comes from the fact that I'm an animator and I like to keep the soldiers in scale with each other. So here's a soldier here. You can see how tall they are. And then you put the Timmee guys next to one of these dudes. And so they're quite large figures indeed. So it kind of limits their use for me as an animator. But they do make very nice toy soldiers to have. I haven't used them much yet at all, and I can't really think of any uses for them at the moment. Probably a historical sort of battle film would be their best role, where they're sort of kept a distance from the other German soldiers or whatever, so you can't tell the height difference. But yeah, that's the Bmc Soldiers. They're quite nice, but they have some strange choices when it comes to the posing department. Up next, we have possibly one of my favourite sets of army men, the Matchbox US Infantry Soldiers. These are superb figures. They're nice and chunky, they have really nice bases, the detail on them is superb, and the pose selection is absolutely fantastic. So you've got your heavy weapons, you've got your bazooka guy, and you've got a Browning machine gun. This dude is like absolutely awesome. Everyone, I think, wanted to have a whole army of these dudes. They're just so cool. The huge long barrel and the sort of nicely tight pose. You've also got your usual shooting guy, both standing and kneeling, which is really superb. You've got a dude in between that looks like he's reloading his rifle, but he can also be advancing, ducking, very useful indeed. Then you have another advancing pose, this guy with his rifle out. I don't know what about this pose, but I absolutely love it. It's one of my favourite Armyman poses just to use. It just looks, it's so fluid. It's a really nicely made figure pose. You got the classic binocular guy who's like waving, grenade throwing dude, radio officer, which is really nice, and of course the flamethrower. And there's a prone figure who's crawling. There's not one that's firing his gun, but that doesn't bother me too much. So yeah, this set of matchbook infantry is really nice. They're based off the Matchbox US Soldiers poses, and they also have ones for the Germans, which I have a few here. The German Afrika Korps Soldiers, which was, you got these guys here. They're very nice, bulky figures. So you got the bazooka. They're like a reflection. Matchbox would make these figure sets, and they would always have the same sort of poses. You would have like at least 2 officers. You would have a machine gun guy. So these two obviously show the sort of ideals. They got the legs in the similar positions. So they always have a similar sort of thing. You got the prone guys holding their rifles out like this. You know, kneeling bazookas, throwing grenades, that sort of deal. At the moment, the manufacturer for these are really hard to come by. The people that make the best ones of these is a company called Billy V, I believe. I don't know if they still make these or not, but that's what you want to search up if you really want these guys. I got all these off eBay. I never searched up Billy V because they're really hard to come across. So that's the person that makes them at the moment, the manufacturer. They're really difficult to come by, which I think, you know, makes them even more special in a way. But they're very, very nice poses. They're sort of like one of the classic Armymen molds that exist, and a lot of these guys would live on. Like you got the machine gunner and all this. That I'll show later on the poses that stick around to stay with, you know, to this day, while other ones would fall sort of to the wayside, which is a shame because some of these poses are just really unique. They're really useful, and they look really good. I also want to point out that mixed among some of these Matchbox sets you'll get, you also get Airfix poses. So this is an Airfix German officer, which I also have the model version of, which I'll show on screen. He's from the German Infantry set from World War II. And there's also a British officer from the 8th Army that I have, that he pops up sometimes with those Matchbox sets as well. They accomplish each other, because they're both making smaller scale figures, Airfix and Matchbox, at the same time. So naturally, when the poses were used for Army men, they would often be, you know, sort of put together. It's the same sort of batch. Now, these are the Airfix Paratrooper poses, and these are possibly my favourite Army men set that there is. Now, these poses are based off the Airfix British Paratroopers, and they've been a lot simplified to be a lot more just generic. And they are probably some of the best Army men that are out there. In my opinion, they are what when people think Army men, they picture these guys. Like this dude in particular. This is one of my favourite Army men poses. Just the marching dude with his rifle and the bayonet. This is what people think when they picture Army men. These are like the classic quintessential poses to have. You've got the rifle guy standing up, the kneeling guy, the dude advancing with his bayonet, another advancing dude. This guy doesn't pop up as often. This guy, in fact, is actually based off another Airfix infantry set, which is the German Infantry. I actually have a model of him as well. You can see that he's based off the running guy. He even has the little canister still on his back, and the bags and stuff in the same place as the German model that he's based off from. But yeah, he doesn't appear in many of the sets. It's usually this lot, such as the submachine gun guy. Not one, but 2 poses advancing on guards, which these are just really nice. Just to have a whole bunch of them is absolutely superb. You've got your pointing guy officer, which is notorious pose indeed, having lots of him. These poses here often are used over and over in other sets, mainly just this guy. Out of the Airfix Infantry, it's this guy that makes it through to other infantry sets, which I will show later on. But yeah, these are just really nice figures. They're chunky, they got good platforms, like all the platforms are really nice and wide. They have a nice level of detail on them. The detail is absolutely superb. And it's just, how they look is just like, they're so very much a soldier. In the terms of like, they could be used for any nation. Like you can say, oh yeah, it looks like a US soldier, but at the same time, there's also elements of like, you can use them as, get away with using them as German soldiers, British soldiers, Russian soldiers, Japanese soldiers. They're absolutely just superb. I find them like one of the best army men figures that you have around. And not much topping them, in my opinion. They look just really nice, they're really useful. And I'm glad to have a lot of them make up the bulk of my army at the moment. Okay, so what do we come to now is sort of a odd collection of army men figures. So you have all these original manufacturers such as Timmee, Airfix, Matchbox and whatnot. They're all making their poses, and a lot of these poses stand out as really iconic. And then you have these soldiers that show up later on. Now, what sets them apart is the look of them. Now, there's about, how many poses? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5 poses, 6 poses of these sort of modern soldiers. There's like a transition period. These probably appeared later on. You can tell that they're kind of set apart because of their helmets. Their helmets aren't the sort of, you know, GI infantry pot helmet that you usually see. They're these more modern helmets. They look like they belong in the sort of Gulf War, you know. They've smelt oil and they're after it, so they're going into the Gulf War. That's what these guys kind of are. They're like the sort of modern ones. I don't know who makes these. I've never heard a manufacturer sort of pin down to them, but they appear absolutely everywhere. Now they're an interesting set of poses. You got this dude here running with his shirt open. He's got his huge pecs going on. He's got a huge machine gun. And he's running along. Got a dude firing a machine gun from his waist. Got a radio dude with his little gun. And got this guy firing his assault rifle, but he's looking straight ahead, which is always interesting. And you got this dude just running bizarrely with his machine gun. And then you've got this guy. Very well-known pose of the dude with the M16 in one hand and the pistol in the other hand. Just sort of like, I surrender, or it's just standing there, just being generic as hell. Now, yeah, I remember these guys dominating in the early 2000s, like 2007, 2008 and all that. These guys, like, absolutely dominating just army men sets. They were everywhere, like, they were in all of them, which you can see later on. So these guys are the separate ones. These are, like, the modern dudes that kind of distinct. And as the manufacturing started to, you know, they started to homogenize and come together as sort of like they're taking bits and pieces from everywhere. These guys would find themselves paired up with older poses from other sets. Like you have, you know, the aforementioned radio guy. And now you have the Matchbox kneeling guy shooting, Matchbox Browning guy, Matchbox bazooka, Matchbox US machine gunner, submachine gunner. And then he's like paired up with the Airfix pointing guy. There's also the binocular waving guy. I don't have one up here at the moment, actually. Yes, I do. It's a lie. Here he is. So you start getting these sort of sets, which, you know, they used to come in like mixed packs, and I used to purchase tons of them. They weren't the best quality. They were smaller. Plastic's a bit more, you know, breakable, I guess. They're nice. They're a lot of memories attached to them, like the grenade throwing dude. Like these, this odd combo of all these poses that start to mesh together to create these sort of sets that you would see along. I've got the Matchbox rifle shooting guy here. He started to appear less in these poses. You didn't get a lot of standing up shooting guys because I guess this dude filled in that sort of role. But these were everywhere. And then now days they're starting to be less and less, but they are being mixed in with this new lot of modern poses. Now these guys here, some of these dudes are really 21st century sort of dudes. Like this guy with his gun and grenade, he looks like he belongs in Afghanistan. This is a very nice figure. I really like him. He's got nice thick, he's big, he's tall. He looks like he's dominating. He's whatever scene he's in, he looks like he's like in charge. Then you got a marching dude. He's fine, you know. Gun is a bit, it's okay. It's like a shotgun or something. It's not too bad. You got this dude who's interesting because he doesn't actually wear a helmet like the other dudes. He's got like this sort of head covering on. Like all the modern armies nowadays are less distinct, and they're all looking more the same in some ways. And their uniform's getting more interesting. So he's kind of like, he's quite modern. But they're also getting mixed in with these Airfix British 8th Army dudes here, which is interesting. So this is what I was getting in bags. Like these kind of poses where it's just like weird. Like he's got sort of a pot helmet here, but look at his gun. It's like a it's a stick with dots on it. Very bizarre gun. Not too bad. You can keep him in the distance and people won't question anything. But yeah, these poses starting getting mixed in with this lot. And I've seen these dudes in particular start to become more common in some of these more even shittier Chinese poses that they're making and stuff like that. So it's like this weird generation that's just like starting to transfer over with these army men figures. Here's a interesting set that I also acquired recently, which shows that some of these poses are still being used. This is very interesting. So you got the modern dudes mixed in with Airfix guys. So you got some of these poses like the marching dude and the shotgun gun and whatever. They're here alongside the Matchbox dudes of like the bazooka and the thing, next to the modern guys with their weapons. So it's an interesting set. It shows that they're still quite being used, and a lot of these sets are starting to get mixed together as well. And this is quite interesting because I think it shows the different generations and types cherry picking to get all the very iconic army men poses that we're all very familiar with nowadays. When you think of army men, you know, picture this dude, got this guy, got the Airfix dude, him. This is a very interesting set where it's all blended together to show the sort of poses that had survived over the years and what people choose to add to manufacture. I also want to touch upon a set of figures that I don't actually own, but I do want to talk about. These soldiers are manufactured by a company that goes by the name Elite Force, and they come in a giant tub with various tanks and helicopters. These images are courtesy of At the Queen's Command, a blog on a wargaming for Victorian miniatures. A link will be provided below in the description for the website. I find these guys quite nice figures. They are based off a few of the Timmee poses, such as the dude with his arm out and his machine gun to his side. There's also the bazooka man, but this one's standing like the Bizarro Timmee pose. You got the pistol officer, you got the mortar guy kneeling down, and you got the two prone poses that are both crawling and firing. There is also the additional standing while firing rifle and a guy kneeling with a machine gun. There's also an officer with binoculars who's actually holding them properly and not waving, and a radio man with a machine gun as well. I think these figures are really nice, not just how they look and how they're made, but also in what they sort of represent. These are modern, updated versions of army men, but they also have the sort of classical poses like the ones from Timmee or, you know, your classic standing up and firing poses and stuff like that. They come across as figures that have a lot of care put into them by the manufacturer. You know, they're not just updated modern figures, but they also reflect back on the older army men manufacturers that were around. Definitely a nice set of figures to have. I'd love to pick up a few of them if I could. Okay, so that does it for now. It was a sort of casual video that I was just trying out. Just me sort of rambling on about my opinion on some of these army men poses. Sort of quick guide distinguishing what brands did what and how they developed over the years. It's quite an interesting little, you know, thing to this culture of army men. Video was unscripted, as you can probably tell. Just something casual to do while you guys wait for more content to come out. Let me know in the comments if you know the names of any of these manufacturers for some of these poses or anything like that. We can assign them proper names other than just, you know, Gulf War guys or whatever. But yeah, so tell me what you think of the video, and I may do more on vehicles or whatnot. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll get more content out to you soon. See ya.